greedy thing.
We are human, we are animals, we crave the ability to be we. I know it's called me undies. We undies might have sounded differently, right?
Is it a disco now?
Yeah, it's the after party, so it's now we go with the flash.
My goal in life is to be a laptop sticker.
Me too.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
It's a great honor, Mr. Jaffe. It's always nice to be with you.
I'm so happy to be with you. I'm honored.
Thanks for doing this, too. It's a real service to the community.
Thank you for doing this, Joseph, for doing CoronaTV in general. And it's your gift to the universe, and it's appreciated.
Very human, and I like that.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're insane!
Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to CoronaTV. Actually, welcome to Carte Blanche. This is the closest I'll ever get to going on Carte Blanche. It's like when I toured Stanford University. I jogged around it. I said, this is the closest I'll ever come to Stanford. But I'm super excited to be back with you. I missed you this weekend, Father's Day weekend. It's a very special episode because I have Derek Watts as my guest. Derek Watts, who is, as I described him, and as I will describe him again, he is the very much alive Andy Rooney of South African journalism, specifically television, magazine journalism, what 60 Minutes is to the United States. Derek Watts is, and Carte Blanche is to South Africa. Now, a few things, I met Derek, let me make this slightly bigger. I met Derek when we both actually keynoted. We both spoke at an event, at an Adele Searle event in South Africa, and little props to my mom, who's pictured in that as well. She is watching, and David Libby says he's watching. This is his favorite live channel. So he's actually, I think, are you saying Carte Blanche is, or are you saying Jaffe Juice TV, CoronaTV is? Well, I am honored either way. But yeah, I met Derek, and I had the opportunity afterwards. We met at my hotel, and we had a couple of beers, and we caught up, and it was terrific. I would describe him as an incredibly down-to-earth, good person, and he just exudes warmth, and you will see that for yourself. So this week we've got Derek on Monday, and then we go into what I call a self-deprecating white male extravaganza, completely unplanned, of course, but unbelievably talented people in their own right. Mr. Chris Brogan, fellow streamy on Tuesday, Richard Mulholland, another South African connection on Wednesday, Andrew Keane, and Greg Verdino, rounding up and rounding off our week. I want to thank you right away and off the bat for everything you're doing for the show. People like David Libby saying what you're saying, it doesn't go unnoticed, and I appreciate it very much that you guys are engaged, and that this is valuable. The most important thing is that this is valuable to you. Well, today is National Onion Ring Day. Why? I have absolutely no idea why it's National Onion Ring Day. And I mean, it's so crazy that we could be celebrating Juneteenth on Friday and then Onion Ring Day on Monday. And I don't know what the connection is. Maybe the connection is to my fat blogging weight. So here is, as promised, my weekly update to you. I cannot fail you. I cannot lie to you. I have to tell you my weight every Monday. When I came back from South Africa, March 18th, I was 200.7. Today, I broke 190, and I'm almost technically not overweight anymore. So I lost about another 1 pound. And I am all in, and I am committed to getting my life back in shape. All it took was a global pandemic. Happy Father's Day, of course, to you, to all the fathers out there. I was actually quite surprised that the Premier League USA went and tweeted this, and tweeted at me. I didn't tweet at them. They tweeted at me. This was something that I'd sent months and months ago, maybe 6 months ago, 3 shirts. As you all know, I'm a Spurs fan. So both my boys wanted Sun shirts. So they had number 7 Sun. And so I decided to get 14 and Father. And I hope you had a very meaningful and special Father's Day. But let's not kid, guys. I mean, let's not kid about who the real champions and heroines are in the typical family. It's not dad, it's mom. And this is so true. I wish I could tell you this is just a joke, but it is completely true. It is definitely true in the Jaffe household. I can tell you that now. So not just happy Father's Day, but to all the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day too. To all of my Facebook friends and LinkedIn connections, there are too many to mention, so I just want to maybe Bob Garfield over there. And wow, there's just so many on LinkedIn. On Facebook, my old principal from my primary school, Solly Kaplinsky, is there. I think middle school, not primary school, whatever, I'm getting old. And then, of course, to all my LinkedIn birthdays today. Happy birthday to all of you. Well, I want to get into the seated soliloquy, and because I want to get Derek on as quickly as I can. And so I want to talk about something that's pretty topical right now. You know, this past weekend, I would say TikTok grew up and matured from a, quote, place for teenagers to dance and lip sync, end quote, to a super spreader platform perfect for expression, activism, and action. Its unique format was perfect in terms of being able to amplify a message and apply the network effects of virality. So for those of you who switched off all media over Father's Day weekend, well done. Here's a quick recap. Donald Trump held a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, amidst a global pandemic. Maybe you heard of it. He originally scheduled it on June 19th, known as Juneteenth or Freedom Day, signifying the end of slavery in the United States. Tulsa, and specifically the Greenwood neighborhood, was also the scene of one of the worst race massacres in the country's history, where in 1921, Black residents and businesses in Black Wall Street were attacked by white residents. Now, Trump's director of communications, Tim Murtaugh, and Brad Parscale, Trump's 2020 campaign manager, they bragged that over 1 million tickets had been requested, so much so that an overflow address had been planned for 40,000 attendees. Inside the Bank of Oklahoma Center, 19,000 were expected. Now, the actual result was an overflow no-show and just over 6,000 largely maskless attendees inside the arena. So what happened? What happened was that Trump got shown up and embarrassed by one constituency he didn't see coming: non-voting members of the public, teenagers on TikTok, no less. Egged on by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and cheerleaded by TikTok grandma, hashtag TikTok grandma, 51-year-old Mary Jo Laup, thousands upon thousands of tickets were requested by a different base, the American Idol voting and K-pop fans who had zero intention of actually showing up. The message from Zoomers was clear. We have a point of view and a say in our future, and if our grandparents' generation in Congress can't show backbone and character, then we surely will. The future suddenly looks a little brighter, or to quote SNL, you've been Ginsburned. Wow, what an amazing, I think, weekend, and something for us to all think about in terms of witnessing these changes occurring behind, like in front of our very eyes. Well, now it's time for my guest. And I figured probably a good thing to do would be to show you a little bit of an intro clip to set the scenes and to whet your appetites.
Climbing teams from around the world have returned home, leaving the mountain to its natural splendor. How many lives have been lost? How many families obliterated?
Seems like a funny attitude.
Carte Blanche, South Africa. Looks forward to a visit.
Thank you very much.
Still number one on the list.
Still number one.
Please, I don't want to
cover the rent and buy food. I thought that would be fine.
It's a perfect day for liftoff.
Ed Bradley, Steve Kroft, Andy Rooney, Morley Safer, Lesley Stahl, Mike Wallace, and Derek Watts. What do they all have in common? They redefined the news magazine program with reporter-centered investigation through the creation of 60 Minutes, and 32 years ago in South Africa, Carte Blanche did likewise. With a distinct Africa flavor from primate hunters in Cameroon, world-beating distance runners in the highlands of Kenya, farm grabs and clashes in Zimbabwe, guerrillas in Rwanda, and global reach from Mount Everest to an atomic aircraft carrier in the Gulf to NASA's bid to get humans onto Mars. Carte Blanche and Derek Watts has been to and done it all. He is a gentle giant, and as I said, he exudes warmth, and I'm thrilled to welcome him to the show today, Mr. Derek Watts. Welcome.
Joseph, how's it going there? Wow, I'm looking like I'm in the dark here. Hey? Should I turn the lights up a bit? Hey?
Why not? Why not? You've got
up a bit of brilliance.
You've got
there.
lovely contrast, right?
Yeah, that's good. Hey, that's better. How are you doing?
I'm doing great now that I actually can see your face, because we had some technical issues earlier.
Yeah, we did. So now I'm on my son's laptop, which is actually not bad. It's working so far, hey? Touch wood.
It's working great. So I love the contrast. You know, you've got the hack, the amateur on the left, that would be me, and then you've got the professional, you know, in his Hitchcockian, I don't know, kind of silhouettes on the right.
We'll just have to get it set to that's good, hey? Here we go.
You look good. And I can do a few things. For example, I can do that. I can give us a nice little, I can play around with my little pieces. I'm actually probably the same as every journalist or broadcaster or late night show, which is I'm a one man or one woman band right now.
Studio director, cameraman, sound specialist, all wrapped in one, and presenter.
And presenter and editor and copywriter. It's been amazing. And, you know, Derek, I mean, when I saw you and when we had a couple of beers, you know, we were talking about writing books. You were talking about writing a book for yourself. I never thought that I would be doing some kind of a web or television or video show, but it's just been tremendous. Now I understand the bug. Now I understand how amazing it is.
Amazing over this period. I've noticed a few friends of mine, like Rob Hersoff, started doing webinars, and now you can't stop him. He's on webinars all day and all night. And I think it's a lead into journalism, isn't it? And, you know, sometimes young people come to me and they say, Derek, or Uncle Derek, no, they don't. But they say, you know, how do I get into broadcasting? I want to be a journalist. But I say, but you are a journalist. And they look at me and they say, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got a smartphone. You got WhatsApp, you got TikTok, you got Twitter, you've got Facebook. You're a journalist. And I mean, we all are these days. I mean, we report, and hopefully not on fake news, but we are reporters, aren't we?
We are, and there's a lot to talk to you about. And I'm trying to think of the best place to start, but maybe I'll start here, which is I normally, you know, I normally play a little bit of a game with my guests, and I come back with a quote. So this is: I can't imagine a person becoming a success who doesn't give the game of life everything he's got. Would you know who said that?
It wasn't Nelson Mandela.
It wasn't.
Was it Donald Trump? No,
he might have said something else.
I reckon I could guess all night, or day for you.
Yeah, it was.
But let me think. I can't. Are you going to tell me?
Well, I'll give you one clue. It was someone in your field. In your field, in terms of journalism, in terms of broadcasting.
Okay, American,
and a real classic stalwart.
Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace was my hero, you see, because when we started, as you said, we started with 60 Minutes. So it's not a coincidence that Carte Blanche is a bit of a copy of 60 Minutes, because when we started in 1988, we had 2 Carte Blanche items, which we did locally, and 2 60 Minutes. So Mike Wallace was part of Carte Blanche for the first, I think, 12 years. And his whole team, Morley Safe, and the whole team. But it hasn't answered your question.
No. It was Walter Cronkite. I decided to go with Walter Cronkite.
Okay. No, famous. Eh?
He also said something about how objective journalism, and he said objective journalism and an op-ed piece have about as much in common as the Bible and Playboy magazine. Maybe I should have chosen that quote.
Yeah, I wonder what Walter Cronkite would think of the news today.
I know it's crazy. Well, what do you think? I mean, you've seen over 32 years. You've seen so much change, so much evolution. I mean, I remember being glued as South Africans still are to this day to Carte Blanche once a week. But the choice, the proliferation, the fragmentation of media, and not just media, but dismedia or disintermediation. It's crazy.
Look, I think the thing is that it's given everybody more opportunity in journalism. And, Joseph, I think when we started with Carte Blanche, we were using cameras that cost then 250,000 rands, which in American terms, we'll have to work that out, but what's exchange, about 16 to 1.
Yeah, so, it's about $5, $6.
Yeah. So guys used to come to us, they were going, say, on an adventure, but there was no ways we could cover it with these expensive cameras. And also they were huge. I mean, they were massive cameras. Whereas now, as I go on stories and take a few clips on my cell phone, and at one stage we used to say cell phone footage, but these days we don't even apologize because the cell phone footage isn't a lot different to the naked eye. I mean, cameramen will go crazy right now, but for the average viewer, it will look very much like the footage we're showing, and it is HD. So it gives you the opportunity to go on all sorts of expeditions, always have a camera with you. So, I mean, basically, if I go to town or to Joburg and something's happening there, I could film it on my cell phone and it would virtually be television quality. So that's and GoPros, of course, everybody's got GoPros all over the place. It's given us a new world of covering events. And I don't know if you've seen that latest BBC wildlife series, where they used a lot of GoPros and they used a lot of aerial footage, and it's a new look at nature because they've covered, for example, a cheetah on the hunt, just following it right through the bush, which you could not normally do.
Amazing.
And I mean, drones have added another dimension. So if you look at all those things we're using now in journalism, it's opened up the whole world to everybody to get involved.
And probably the biggest, I would say, transformative aspect of all of that is the fact that the phone is always on hand to capture a moment. And when we look at what's happening now with Black Lives Matter, with George Floyd, with Rayshard Brooks, it is the ability to capture that moment, and it can and will be held against you.
Absolutely, Joseph. And that's sort of raises the big question, doesn't it? Because getting footage and getting news has become pretty easy, including for the networks. I mean, of course, they've got CNN, Fox, everybody's got their reporters around the world. But a lot of the time they're getting footage from cell phones being sent into them where they haven't got a reporter at that stage. So a lot of people, when they want news, go to, for example, Twitter or Facebook because they're getting unsolicited footage on Twitter. Now, sadly, if there's a bomb goes off somewhere or there's a disaster somewhere, you're always going to get the news very quickly on Twitter. because it has to be verified by the networks, and eventually it comes onto the networks, I reckon, about 2 hours later, maybe 3 hours later. So first of all, you're getting immediacy with social media, but you're not getting any filter. So this is where it's becoming interesting in news. And of course, the big fake news thing, but it's interesting to see how people are absorbing a lot of news these days, which hasn't been verified and to some extent is fake. No doubt about it. And sometimes I go through Twitter and somebody's got some random story which sounds absurd, and you have to go to Snopes or what are those, just Snopes, to verify.
Yeah, Snopes, yeah.
Yeah, Snopes. Because I don't know, also people just love putting out stories that sometimes are just totally fake, or it was like 10 years ago and they make out like it was last year. And it's normally some speech, and it's normally, to be honest, some racist speech, which is meant to be, the Dean of Oxford University made this speech. You look it up and it's total BS, But that is the danger of the new media, is that a lot of young people, like my kids, don't watch traditional news, CNN, they don't watch SABC here, they don't even watch Carte Blanche at times, but they're on their phones for news. And the danger there is that, you just have to be more wary of what you're reading, what you're taking in, and verify it at times. Don't spread it until you've made sure that it's true.
Well, one of the interesting things that happened this past weekend was that Trump had his rally, the first rally back in 3-4 months since the pandemic hit, and not one of the networks actually, including, by the way, Fox News, covered it. And I found that remarkable, because that's what I would call, from built to suck, this idea of a heresy, because you had these networks turning their backs on ratings, because quite frankly, everybody wanted or would have wanted to watch, whether it was out of support or morbid curiosity or whatever the case may be. The only way to watch the rally was streaming and was digitally. And I thought that was interesting in terms of one trend. And of course, the other counter trend is what happened with TikTok, where it's become known that, as I said in the soliloquy, that you had all of these teenagers essentially buying up thousands upon thousands of tickets and creating this false, punking basically the campaign, and with this false inflated sense of success. And that, I find as a lover of culture, that it's just fascinating.
I thought it was covered, though. Was it just I did see a CNN reporter there, CNN journalist, but was the rest of it not covered?
They were covering it, and they were obviously filming clips, but they were offering commentary rather on the channel, as opposed to giving a platform. And I think maybe, if that's anything, what that's telling us is there is fatigue here. There is fatigue in terms of the always on. I mean, I will tell you, Derek, and I know that you would underscore what I'm about to say wholeheartedly. We need in this world more than ever the power of journalism, the power of curation, the power of that professionalism that slows down in order to speed up. And I think the world is finally coming to terms with the fact that we've been so smothered and overloaded with all of this drivel that we want quality now over quantity.
I think that is an ideal, though. But if I have to be brutally honest, I don't think it's going to happen, because I don't think Generation Z is going to be into it, or are into it already. I think they are quite happy with social media. But remember, it's not to say they're not discerning, because, I mean, obviously with all of social media, you choose who you follow. So I don't think we must say that they're not discerning and they won't follow good news sites. But on Twitter or Facebook, you've got the option to follow who you want to follow and who you trust. So there is still that element of finding the news you want. So I don't think we must discard it, but I don't think it'll come down to really totally how can I put it, like the Verified, like the Times, like Panorama in the UK. 60 Minutes, to their credit, still going strong. But I mean, that is an incredible story. And I mean, that is the sort of journalism that we're talking about. But there's not a lot of it around. And I think we can see why. But if I can ask you a question, you know, I think even here we see the bias of CNN just being so anti-Trump. What is it like over there? Do you go between Fox and CNN to get a balanced view?
So I tried for a while. Now I watch CNN, and you know what I'm trying to do is to use the phrase, I'm trying hard, really, really hard to keep it real. Which is to be honest with myself and be honest with others. And there is a tremendous amount of bias on CNN, and it's infuriating sometimes because I remember, like, one of my personal memories was, and this is because I'm a Democrat and people know that of me, but when Rudy Giuliani was running for president the first time, I so wanted him to do better than he did. Because he was America's mayor, because he was the guy in charge when, you know, during 9/11. And the minute that he opened up his mouth and he started just spewing party lines, where it just felt like he was a puppet or a parrot, it repelled me. And I think I've tried to switch sometimes to Fox News, but it drives me insane. But it is apparent, to your point, that you could be looking outside right now. I'm looking outside. One says the sky is blue and the other says the sky is red. Yeah. And you're like, this is insane.
Because we don't get Fox here, but I'd like to have that balance, I must say.
I tell you what,
I enjoy CNN. They've got some great journalists, some great reporters, but the anti-Trump stance is just so embedded that I just like a little bit of, a little bit of unbiased journalism, you know.
Well, I tell you what, I think there are two trends that I would say to answer your question, that in terms of where we move forward. The one is, I think what we need to do is go back to the days. I don't know if you were familiar with a program called Crossfire, or there was one on Fox called Hannity and Combs, where you had someone from the left. Yeah, someone from the left, someone from the right, so that you always had two points of view presented at the same time. That is one thing which I think could help, which is some kind of at least olive branch. The other is, and I do believe this as a, you know me as a startup guy and a tech guy, that we are going to see AI-powered technology that will, the actual correct, I think, industry term is to fisk. Fisking going on, and debunking going on, and fact checking going on in real time, where immediately any lie or mistruth or alternative fact or exaggeration will be flagged and visualized accordingly. And I think that is going to not own, and I'll tell you where, you know, funnily enough,
it started with Facebook, hasn't it? With some of Donald Trump's posts that are being deleted. So that is exactly what you're talking about.
Or at least a little exclamation point that says warning, or check out the facts, or things may be a little different. So Derek, I want to take you back in time, and
to my childhood.
Yes, I want to take you back to your childhood, and I tell you why, because I'm trying to be more of a journalist, more like you. No, it was Father's Day.
Yes.
And I was on your site and I saw this beautiful image, and you spoke about your dad, and you said that when you were scared, he would always say to you, "What's the worst thing that can happen?" And I just, I lost my dad when I was very young, so I never had that in my life. But I would love for you to tell me a little bit about your dad, and specifically how he influenced your life and your career, your journey into journalism.
It's quite intriguing because, you know, my father was a boilermaker on the ships in Cape Town. And he worked his way up to work for an engineering firm called Drury Wickman in Johannesburg and started doing relatively well. Then he was transferred. That's why I went to Zimbabwe to live in Bulawayo, because he went there as managing director of Drury Wickman in Bulawayo. And he was a very proud man, just terribly, terribly straight. You know that old expression, calling a spade, but brutally frank. And yet people loved him for that. He kept his staff at Drury Wickman for decades, although he was so tough. But what I'm saying with the story is that eventually I think he was a frustrated journalist, because he used to write so many letters to the local paper, the Chronicle, whatever it was about, having a go at them, having a go at the city council, and then eventually found his way to being the chairman of the Broadcasting Corporation, which was quite amazing for somebody who was an engineer. So there was a bit of that journalism, I think, that streak in my father. And my brother, he was selling property, and I went on a river trip with him in Namibia, down the Orange River, which is a beautiful trip, by the way. Have you done that? Absolutely stunning trip. Those nights out on the Orange River are just beautiful, starlit nights. And I was writing for a magazine by then, and I started to write this article. My brother Roy was saying, yes, don't forget to say we had ice cream on the third day, and don't forget to talk about the rapid on day 2. And I said, look, Roy, go and write this yourself, you know. And he went and wrote it, and then became a journalist himself. So it's quite interesting the way that we have got into journalism more by accident than anything else. I mean, in my case, it was more by accident. You know, I went, my first job was as a computer operator on an ICL System 4, the size of a house and the power of a budget cell phone.
Wow.
Then I went to work for Rank Xerox. You know, I was selling copy machines for them here and in London. Came back and I was selling plastic bottles for a company called Exactix, based in the Cape. And I was on a sales trip in East London at a hotel there, and had a bit of a night out. Came down for breakfast, and the boss, Jaime Meyerson, said, Derek, do you enjoy this job? So I said, Jaime, you know, I enjoy, but I don't wake up every morning thinking I must sell a plastic bottle, which I think was the wrong answer.
Yeah.
So Jaime said, have you ever thought of... But I mean, can you imagine? So from there, he didn't actually fire me. I did resign, I promise. But I went back to Zim and got a job as a cadet reporter for the newspaper. And that's how I started in journalism. But isn't it strange when you think about your life? You can go to university and get a degree over 5 years. You can plan certain things. You can plan to become a doctor. But many of the big things in life happen by chance. I don't believe it's always chance, because I'm quite a religious person. Things that happen that weren't planned for, like meeting your wife, or your future wife. I mean, it's generally a chance meeting, isn't it? So that's how I got into journalism, basically at a hotel in East London where I wasn't very diplomatic with the boss. But I must say, Joseph, from the time I started writing for the Herald, and mainly as a sports reporter, I never worked. I don't think I've ever worked since then, because I just love journalism, whether it's writing. I was a writer for a lot of my life. Bit of radio, but then I was a TV sports reporter, and now Carte Blanche for nearly 32 years. So I really can say I haven't worked over those years since I became a cub reporter.
It's one of the, I've been listening to a lot of interviews during quarantine as I go on my runs, whether it's Tim Ferriss or Howard Stern interviews. And actually, Tim Ferriss was interviewing Madeleine Albright, and just her story is fascinating. And and she points out that everything that happened to her led to something else. It may not have been a straight line. It may not even have been in the right direction, but she wouldn't be where she was or where she got to without every single moment in her life informing or influencing or affecting it, even if it was just getting fired, for example, or resigning. Sorry, you resigned.
No, definitely resigned. Well, I'm sticking to that story. Yeah. But I think it's interesting. I mean, is it synchronicity? Is it recognizing opportunities when they're there? But the whole concept is interesting, just being aware of those possible changes and being brave enough to take them. Because when I say brave enough, so selling my plastic bottles, I had to go to a quarter of that salary to go and work as a cub reporter, which took a certain amount of bravery. I was used to a lifestyle and went as a cub. I couldn't afford a car. I had to live in a bit of a shack. But that's some of the decisions you make, you know.
And I think it's not just the moments in your life, but also the encounters and the people. Also on your beautiful mosaic and tapestry of photos, I came across this one, and that's Michael de Morgan, if I recall correctly.
Wonderful, wonderful man, Michael de Morgan, and he was also interested in sports. So he always used to toddle through to the sports desk and see what I had on the sports lineup and give me a bit of advice and tell me about some of the famous cricketers of old. A delightful man, and we actually went to stay with him because he joined the embassy after he retired from SABC, and he was living in London. And Belinda and I went to stay with them in London. His wife, Mike's wife, Katrina, and really down to earth, lovely man. And we used to have a lot of laughs and a lot of good times, even in the studio, because he was so relaxed in the studio. And this was my big deal because, I'd been running a squash center before that. And, another chance thing. Okay, so why did it's a long story, isn't it? But I was working for SABC, mainly as a writer, but doing the odd bit of, on-camera work, but very little. And I went to see Saki Berger, the boss, and I said, but, I came here to be a presenter. Hey, Derek, he said, no, you must write. Your writing's good. So, but I liked Saki. He was a lovely man. And eventually I said, no, Saki, I'm out of here. I'm going to go and run a squash center in Durban. So that's what I did for 4 years. Ran the squash center, windsurfed at Vetchi's Pier, out to sea, and played a lot of squash. And eventually my back packed in, but it packed in badly. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't drive a car. I couldn't go to movies. That was bad injury. And so it's not much good being in a squash center when you can't play. And I was watching the news on a Saturday, and I saw they now had a separate sports reporter on news. And the guy was Rusty van Druten, who hated sport, and I knew he didn't like sport. So I remember just seeing that on the Saturday night and just couldn't wait to get to a phone on Monday, because this was pre-cell phone, to phone them. And I was angry. And I crawled to the phone on Monday morning, phoned Kiran Maria, who was my old boss there. And I said, Kiran, he's doing my job. I always wanted that job. And Kiran said, okay, we'll phone you back just now. Phoned back by 11 o'clock, and they said, okay, you can have the job, but you've got to be here next week. So I had to sell the squash center and get to Joburg, and started as a sports reporter on news, sitting next to my heroes, which was Michael de Morgan and Adrian Steed and those presenters who I'd admired for years. And I couldn't believe that now I was sitting next to them, and I had to be in the studio at the same time. I couldn't creep in later. I had to be with them and watch them doing their news, and then I'd do my sport. And always used to say, we had more sport on a Saturday than news, But what are we going back to? We're going back to a chance. So if I hadn't broken my back I might still be playing squash in Durban, which isn't, I don't say necessarily a bad thing, probably a very nice thing to be doing. Maybe still windsurfing or Fetchi's Pier, but it was that back injury that got me into being a sports presenter. So it's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
it is, and look, it's the things that happen, the chances, the encounter, looking and I think respecting and embracing it and going with the flow. I think it's the second point is loving what you do, and that is apparent. If you don't love what you do, in this case, even seeing someone who didn't love what they did was enough for you to pursue that and say, I love it more. And I want it.
Exactly.
And then I think of the words of your father, right? Which is, what's the worst that can happen? Which is, sometimes you've got to go head first or embrace something in order to be able to, just be all in. And not, the only thing to fear is fear itself.
As Walter said, hey? Go all in. Yeah,
well, that's why I put it there.
Yeah, but especially when you're single, I think you can do that. When you're married, I suppose financially you can't always do exactly what you want to do. But I've known people or couples do amazing things. Relatives of mine just suddenly gave up their jobs, went sailing around the world with their kids, schooled them on the boat. Best 4 years they've ever had. And they were brave enough to just sell up. And they didn't have millions. It was conservative, but they bought a small boat and sailed around the world and taught their kids at sea, which I think that 4 years they'll remember forever. It's a bit like lockdown, that we've all got to know each other pretty well and having to educate our kids. Not that I am, of course, my kids are older, but so many of my friends are having to sort of homeschool their kids. It's been a learning curve, hasn't it?
It certainly has. Now, we're going to move over to our Zoom room in about 5-ish minutes. And if you want to ask Derek a question or hear some more stories, I would welcome you to, in fact, I would invite you to come. I mean, there's so many questions to ask you about meeting. I mean, you've met so many people that, just to meet, Bishop Tutu, it's just, and I know some of the people that you've met. It's not even people, it's places, it's being amidst war zones. What a life story you've had, Derek, and we'll leave that to the Zoom after show. But I'm actually going to ask you a question from one of my, in fact, you'll probably see him in the after show. And Jan, by the way, he always asks questions that are so esoteric I can never actually repeat them because I'm like, what is this? What goes on in the mind? But this one I can. He said, what are you still learning about people and their stories?
Wow, that's a difficult question for this time of night. It's all right for you. It's still daytime there. And what am I still learning? I'm learning that you can very rarely take people at face value. I can be very shallow in one way, and this is a huge admission to make, but I can make assumptions about people and think that they are a specific type of person, that they are possibly mean-spirited, that they are angry people, that they are violent people. And because why I say that is because sometimes I have to go and bust them, and walk in and accuse them of something. And you can never really make up your mind about somebody and know that that person is totally like that. The presumptions I make invariably are wrong. There's some people I've interviewed that are really true to how I thought they would be, but very few. I think Deepak Chopra was just as I imagined him to be, and that was a wonderful interview with him in, was it La Jolla? And San Diego way, somewhere around there. Some people have been true to character, but the amazing thing is that you can't really build a true picture of somebody until you've met them. You might have seen interviews with them, you might speak to Uncle Google about them and see stories about them, but it's just a fact of life that, you know, you always learn with every interview is don't make assumptions about people. I think that's the lesson. Never make assumptions.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson, and I find myself telling my kids the skit. I think it was either Monty Python or Benny Hill, which said, "Never assume, because you make an ass out of you and me." But no, I think it's a great story, and I think, you know, as much as we know and we think we know, and certainly that applies to celebrity and maybe even to politicians, we only see one side, or we see what we're allowed to see.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people have to put on a facade. I mean, Hollywood is like that, and I've been fortunate to meet a few people from Hollywood. One person who's exactly like he is on screen is Larry King, just exactly. And I mean, I had a wonderful interview with him. But you know, what was great was he was so enthusiastic about, you know, this two-bit reporter in South Africa, and just being enthusiastic about the interview. You know, I think, yeah, what sort of character do you have to be that enthusiastic all the time? And so Larry King and Jane Fonda, and I'm dropping names now, which I shouldn't, because Prince Charles told me it shows that you lack form. No, but there are some people that just stand out as just being, as I would have imagined, but that is a minority, absolutely.
So here at Corona TV, what we do sometimes is we have standing counts for we'd say, you know, like yellow cards, the equivalent, transgressions. So right now the Prince Charles name drop count is on 1. So be careful, you might get the red card. Well, Derek, I mean, the time has flown, and it's like, just like, the only thing I wish we could do is actually have a real beer, like we did at the President Hotel. But Derek,
we had a Corona there.
I'm denying it. Probably was. Maybe it was a soul. Derek is going to join us in the Zoom after show, and that's at bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. And if you actually want to find out more about Derek, you should take the time, go to derekwatts.co.za. See, I didn't say ZA, derekwatts.co.za. And you can see this beautiful photo wall of his life, of his journey, of his experiences, people he's met. Some are famous and some are the exact opposite, but their stories are just incredible stories of bravery, of heroism, of courage, of conquering adversity. And if you want to book Derek for your next webinar or virtual event, you can do that as well on derekwatts.co.za.
And I'd love to fly over to the United States of America soon.
Well, you know, when you
give me a job,
yeah, when you do, I'll be meeting you there with the Corona, my friend.
Okay, good thing, man.
Well, thank
so
you,
we're going
Derek.
to join you in the chat room.
Yes, I will see you there.
Okay,
exactly, in about 2 minutes. And that was Derek Watts. He is another of those people. He's exactly as he appears. The warmth, as I said, the down-to-earth nature. Just like, you know, I think it was Larry King demonstrating that enthusiasm. You just saw that from him as well. I will be back tomorrow with Mr. Chris Brogan himself, and hope you can join me. And if not, we'll see you in the Zoom room. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.